سلام، أنا ياسر الغسلان وهذه حلقة جديدة من التعديل الأول. اليوم ضيفي هو ضيف استثنائي، والمقابلة في حد ذاتها مقابلة استثنائية لأنها باللغة الإنجليزية، وضيفي هو الفنان والمنتج والكوميدي الأمريكي من أصل عربي المعروف أحمد أحمد، اللي معروفة مقاطعه وبرامجه ولقاءاته المتعددة وأكسس اوف ايفل برنامجه المشهور اللي قام فيه مع مجموعة من الكوميديين بعد أحداث سبتمبر، أصبح معروف في الوطن العربي. التقيت فيه في وقت سابق وتكلمنا عن مجموعة من المحاور الخاصة بالعرب في أمريكا، من الناحية السياسية، من ناحية هوليوود، من ناحية الاندماج داخل المجتمع الأمريكي، وطبعا سلطنا الضوء على تجربته الشخصية وقصة هجرته هو وأهله لأمريكا. ما أبغى أطول في اللقاء أو ما أبغى أطول في المقدمة، ونبدأ معكم هذه الحلقة.
I jumped at the opportunity to be on this show because I myself have a lot of First Amendment issues that I deal with. So, well, let's just go ahead and point out the elephant in the room. I'm from the Middle East. Thanks. Thanks. Any other Arabs in here besides me? 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. 4. Well, it only takes one of us.
Ahmed, thank you very much for joining us and joining me in the First Amendment program, which I hope and I'm sure will be very insightful and informative as well. So thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Ahmed, I would like to start with you from just the beginning. You know, you moved with your parents in a very early age from Helwan. I think you were born there. And then you came with your parents and moved permanently here. So can you just, as an introduction, talk a little bit about this whole journey of moving and immigrating with the family to the States?
Yeah, you know, my father, much like most, Arab, Middle Eastern, Muslim immigrants, back in the late 70s, actually early 70s, came to America for the American dream, So my father worked he had a bunch of different things he did, but at one point he was managing a cement company, I believe. He had my older sister, him and my mother had me, and then I think I was about a month and a half, 2 months old when he got his immigration papers to come to America. And so, we grew up in Riverside, California, very American upbringing, very kind of middle class, lower middle class. I had a very American upbringing outside of the house. And then inside the house, obviously, it was very cultural household, very Islamic household. What we were doing when we were growing up, the other kids in the neighborhood, weren't doing. My parents, they only ate halal meat. So there wasn't anything, there weren't any halal stores back then in the 70s. So my parents, my mom or dad would drive to a farm 40 minutes away in Fontana, California, and load up the station wagons with chickens, ducks, rabbits, protein basically.
Yeah.
And they would do they would kill the animal right in the backyard. So to me, I was a young kid. I just thought, oh, this is a normal thing. But most American kids thought that there was something, gruesome happening.
Right. Well, yeah. That's basically, I think, you've touched a very important issue. I think that a lot of people talk about when they talk about Arabic community and Arab American community is that kind of struggle in culture between what you see at home and what then you go out at school and with your with your neighbors. So I'm sure that maybe had an impact on you personally growing up. So how did that actually impact your bringing up, and then your relationship with friends and with your community, and making you in the end who you are today?
You know, alhamdulillah, I appreciated every moment of it. My parents were very strict growing up. And my dad worked like 16 hours, 15 hours a day as an automotive mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't around much, during like the crucial times, but on the weekends, he was there. Back in the 70s, people didn't know anything about the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
We were this sort of foreign, dangerous, exotic, I remember during the Iran-Contra era,
Mm-hmm.
we would get death threats. People would call our house and leave nails under the tires and
Oh.
throw eggs and toilet paper at our house. And they would say, go back to your country. And it's like, we're from Egypt. It's a different, what are you doing?
Part of the world, yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to be racist, be a smart racist,
Right.
So people they just putting it all together, if you're Arab, if you're Muslim, if you're Indian, if you're Pakistani, anything brown and from that side of the world, you're all the same, right?
Yeah.
So, and then I got to high school, and race didn't really play a card for me in high school because I think I just kind of blended in with everybody else. Most people thought I was like Puerto Rican or Hawaiian or Italian or Greek or whatever. And then I moved to Hollywood when I was 19 to pursue a career in acting, and that's when the race card kind of, played a big part in my career, because Hollywood is very, closed-minded and stereotypical when it comes to casting,
Right.
producing projects, portraying the Arab culture, the Muslim religion, the Middle Eastern culture in a accurate way. And I think that's what Hollywood has been lacking for so many years, is just accuracy. I think there was.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Hollywood, I think, is an area that I think we'll need to dig in more in depth, because it's, I think, very important, especially with all what we're seeing recently with a lot, even from the past, a lot of, new Arab stars coming out and playing a big role. So I'd like to focus on that issue specifically more in depth. But, while you were growing up, we understood the dynamics when you were still a kid. Then when you grow up a little bit, then you became a young man. You went to maybe university, you had friends from different background. How did that, you being an Arab American and a Muslim, affect your kind of dealings with them? Were you okay? Were you really very much an American, or were you still being looked at as being, an outsider?
Well, both, because I speak perfect English. I grew up very Western. I was raised in Riverside, California, which is about 45 minutes from all the beach cities. There weren't a lot of Middle Eastern or Arabs around when I was growing up, very small handful. In fact, lately, it's funny because I used to always, Egyptians, everything we do in our culture is Arabic, right? So the music, the food, the language, even being raised Muslim, Islam was, conceived in the Arab world. So everything about Egyptians, is Arab. But the funny thing is, I used to always talk about that because geographically, I just didn't want to confuse white people. Okay. So in my old YouTube comedy clips from Axis of Evil 10, 12 years ago, I would say, oh, Arabs do this, Arabs do that.
Yeah.
And nobody really knew the difference until the internet, became available and YouTube was present. And some of my clips popped up, and you see all these people leaving comments, under the clips, and they would say, "Hey, man, technically you're not Arab. Technically you're from Egypt, which makes you North Africa. So technically that makes you African. So really you should be claiming black." And
So
I'm
they
like,
became more aware.
hey, I'll take black all day long.
Yeah.
But to get back to your point, do I consider myself Arab? Technically, no. But do I practice the culture, eat the food, love the music, you know, dance the dance. Yes. You know, my culture is Arabi, but so there's been a little bit of a funny argument because of that. And so I've just been trying to dissect that cultural silver lining, because a lot of people are still out to lunch. They don't understand the difference between an Arab and a Muslim. They just don't know.
And does that
And
make
especially
you feel,
these days.
yeah, does that make you feel comfortable when you make fun of Arabs? I mean, you know, when you're part of a culture and you feel integrated into it, it makes it maybe much more comfortable for you. But now that you're saying that maybe you don't feel as Arab, when you do make fun, and of course, a lot, we look at it and we understand the irony of it and the comedy behind it. But do you think that that is something okay? You don't feel like, why am I doing this to them?
No, I think, look, if you can't take a joke, then you shouldn't be in the room.
Right.
You know, I always tell people that if you're in a place where somebody's, you know, trying to bring humor into the world and into the room, then if you get offended easily, then you shouldn't be there.
Right.
And I think, you know, there's obviously a couple topics that are not funny. There's a couple things that I don't touch. Some comics do. I just choose not to. I just don't want to go there.
Right.
There's no need to go there. Being funny is already edgy enough. Or you know, talking about certain issues.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, look, the Arab culture has, you know, hours and hours of humor around it and behind it. And you know, we as a culture are very funny. And we can laugh at other people, but we don't like it when people laugh at us.
Right.
And
But things I think
that's
has changed with time. I mean, today making fun, most of even comedians in the Arab world today, big part of their material is making fun of their own, you know, lifestyle or yeah.
It took a minute. It didn't happen overnight.
Right.
You know, we started doing Axis of Evil comedy tour. Well, I started talking about being from the Middle East in like 1995. So I started, I was one of the first people to go out there and get ahead of it and get in front of it and talk about it from a Western perspective and make it easy for people to digest and make it palatable. And then as the years went on, you know, a lot of young comedians came out, you know, and you know, were able to ride the wave and make it a lot easier for them to be introduced to Hollywood and to the world.
After the 90s, you've got like on 2001, you had September 11th. And after September 11th, you had the Axis of Evil show.
Yeah.
Now, the 11th September, when it happened, how did that affect and impact you as an individual, as well as your career as a comedian and as an actor and somebody that is in the entertainment business?
I gotta say, it's a bad time to be from the Middle East. In fact, I read a statistic on CBS.com that said right after 9/11, hate crimes against Arabs and Middle Eastern people and Muslims went up over 1,000%. Yeah, which apparently still put us in 4th place behind blacks, gays, and Jews. Do you guys know this? We're still in 4th place.
September 11th affected me in a multi-dimensional way because it affected me personally. It affected my stand-up comedy. It affected traveling. It affected working in Hollywood. There was a lot of racism in the air. You can feel it, you know. Traveling. I was traveling a lot as a comedian, so traveling was difficult. I was arrested, detained, profiled on several occasions for a few, like many years, probably I would say a good 7 to 10 years after 9/11. Every time I went through an airport, anywhere around the world, I'd always get pulled over. They got to take me to I call it the brown room, right? They put all the brown people in one room.
Yeah.
And then, you know, career-wise, you know, Hollywood wasn't really writing a lot of parts for Middle Eastern people, Arabs, Muslims. And if they did, it was the terrorist or the cab driver or the sleazy Arab prince with a lot of money. who's a womanizer. You know, all the stereotypes. They love stereotypes, Hollywood.
Right.
It's not until recently that Hollywood has kind of opened up the doors a little bit, and they've let some of these young, Middle Eastern, Arab, Muslims come up and have a voice, like Rami Youssef. He has this show on Hulu called Rami. Hassan Minhaj, who's I believe he's a Indian Muslim who has the show on Netflix called Patriot Act. Rami Malek, who won an Oscar, for Bohemian Rhapsody. So, I think our culture are starting to be recognized a little bit more lately, and that's it's a good feeling. I feel like I was ahead of my time. When I first came on the scene, they weren't looking at me or looking at my ideas or listening to my pitches at all back then. So now it's, the doors have opened, I think, a little bit more. We'll see what happens after, right now we're dealing with COVID. So our production has shut down and,
but you're still facing issues. I mean, I read recently that in May 2019, somebody called 911 on you after, I think, a joke or something. So what was that all about?
Well, there's a joke. I do it all over the world. I've done it 1,000 times. It's not even a joke. I ask the audience, hey, any Middle Eastern people in the room tonight?
Right.
And then typically a few people will clap, And I say, oh, that's great. There's a small group of us here. But hey, it only takes one of us.
Yeah.
And it's just
I've heard
sarcastic
that multiple times in your show. So yeah, it's part of your routine.
It's just part of the routine. It's a sarcastic, dry, backhanded, like just little go-to joke, just to kind of get the crowd awake and alert.
Yeah.
Because people normally laugh uncomfortably, and then I say, but seriously, lock the doors, and then that gets another laugh.
Yeah.
So, we live in a world where our president is, he's a tyrant, and he's dividing people. He's created racism to a whole new level, and all this brainwashing is what resulted in this guy calling 911 on me because he thought that I said, "Oh, we can start our own little terrorist organization."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Hey, buddy, terrorists don't wear Under Armour."
Right. Yeah, they're not that funny anyway.
They're not that funny. So the police showed up. They interviewed me. I recorded them on my phone. I put it on Twitter that night. It went viral the next day. All the press picked it up. It became global news for about 15 minutes. I was doing a lot of interviews and stuff for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, and then the press like died down and settled down, and I just went back to normal again. But it put a little bit of a spotlight and a flashlight on the darkness of Americans and how they view us, and it was kind of a cool moment where I got to kind of revel in because I got pushed out of the conversation. It wasn't even about me anymore.
Right.
There was like a whole global debate happening on Twitter and stuff, racism, Islamophobia, freedom of speech, what are you allowed to say, political correctness, this, that, and the other. So it really had nothing to do with me after that.
Right.
And it was a kind of a cool feeling because that one little joke started a global debate.
Right.
And and thank God, like I didn't go to jail. The police were actually very nice. They were kind of embarrassed to be there, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at it from its overall context, you would basically see there was nothing behind it.
Well, the woman, the cop, the Mexican male cop, even said, "Hey, look, this is the first time for us." And I said, "Yeah. Me too."
Yeah. Ahmed, in terms of the Arab community now, we would like to go maybe expand a little bit on. Do you think that the Arab American community was able in the past and even today to integrate into the whole society with maintaining their culture and their heritage, being an American, Arab American? Or do you think that today it's either Arabs that want to live like Arabs in the States, or Arabs that want to just forget they were Arabs and become purely American. Do you see that there's kind of a problem in its identity, the Arab American identity in the States?
Yeah, you make a good point because look, if you are an Arab and you move to the States, whether by choice or because you have to, you have to assimilate, you have to acclimate, you have to be able to go with the flow. Mm-hmm. Because if you can't, then you shouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. And what I've noticed, in the most of my life is the Arab community typically don't integrate with other communities. That's just from my personal
Why
experience.
Do you think that? What's the reason you think?
Fear, lack of inclusivity, maybe feeling like, Americans don't appreciate us. Why should we appreciate them? I don't know. I don't know the psychology behind it, but typically you won't see other cultures go to like Arab nightclubs, Arab restaurants, Arab concerts, Arab wedding, Arab whatever. You just don't see them. Maybe one of the friends in the group has an American friend or a black friend or a Mexican friend or whatever, and you'll see that token friend or two there. But you rarely see a lot of integration, and it's too bad, to be honest. I mean, for a culture that's so unified with all of our history, food, music, language, the whole spectrum, we're almost the most divisive culture, which is too bad.
And do you see that as being maybe one of the reasons why Arabs in Hollywood weren't able to penetrate in a way that similar to other, let's say, cultures, let's say Hispanics, or even the African American culture, or even when we talk about the Jewish culture and background as being part of an integrated America? Do you think that is one of the reasons why Arabs weren't actually proceed in a positive way, as well as being integrated into this business?
Well, again, another funny question.
I tried to make it serious, but anyway.
No, I mean, Arabs are very culturally, historically, we are some of the best artists in the dancers, chefs, musicians. Egypt is known as the Hollywood of the Middle East.
Right.
We have it in our blood. The problem is translating that to America has been a difficult struggle. And a lot of the reason is because Arabs, let's face it, a lot of the Arab culture feels like Hollywood owes us. They don't owe us, excuse my language, they don't owe us shit.
But owe us in what sense?
I always see, Arabs and Muslims complain, how come they don't put us in a good light? How come they always write us to be bad people? Mm-hmm. Well, how about this? Write your own movie. Mm-hmm. Write your own TV show. Mm. Look what Rami Youssef did. He has a TV show on Hulu called Rami. Mm-hmm. And it's about this Egyptian Muslim kid trying to figure out life. Like,
right.
he did it. And I respect him for that. The problem is he's, like myself, one of the very small demographics that are trying to, move that needle. Most Arabs want quick money, business, gas station, strip mall, or your doctor, lawyer, dentist, accountant, maybe, or your businessman, right? You have to open a business or this, that, and the other. It's like, okay, what about the art community? Out of the whole Arab world, and you know this, we have the most money.
Yeah.
So why can't, if you're going to go out and spend $1 million on a shopping spree because your wife wants a Gucci bag and a Bentley, but you can't give that $1 million to a independent, filmmaker who went to film school, who that's their dream and their studies and their vision is to go out. Arabs almost rarely finance other Arabs or Middle Eastern or Muslims projects. And they always say, no, leave it up to the Jews. It's like, no, Don't leave it up to the Jews, because if you leave it up to the Jews, it's never going to get done. We have to tell our own stories. Nobody knows how to tell our stories. We know how to tell our stories.
Maybe because one of the issues maybe is because you've got two different mentalities. One mentality is one that wants to make money. So whatever sells, I'm going to invest in, regardless of the topic. And on the other side, you've got the topic. And when you talk about the topic, then you've got Arabs are not one body. You've got different Arabs, different backgrounds and agendas. So maybe you need a visionary Arab investor in business that takes...
They're very, very far and few between. And let me tell you something. If there's an Arab investor out there who is complaining about Hollywood and how they portray us, you have no right to complain at all. Either do something, you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution.
Right.
So if you're one of those Arabs who is a high roller and you're living large and you're sick and tired of watching these Netflix shows and how they depict us in a demonic and negative way, write the check.
Yeah, you should do something about it.
Or do something. Write the check. Go find that production company. Go find that Arab visionary. Go find that Egyptian comedian who started Axis of Evil. Go collaborate with somebody and say, hey, I want to be part of the solution. I can financially back your vision. I'll help you do it. But when was the last time that happened?
Yeah. You bring me back to a question I wanted to ask previously about Axis of Evil. How did that project came together?
Axis of Evil.
You're an Egyptian American. Then you've got I think Abdullah. I think his name is a Palestinian. Then you've got Maz Jobrani, an Iranian. So it's a kind of an interesting mixture.
Well, we had Maz Jobrani, who's Iranian American. We had Aaron Cater, who's half Palestinian, half white, and Dino Abdullah, who's half Palestinian, half Italian. It was at a time when the world was thirsty for something new, and Mitzi Shore, who owns, God rest her soul, she passed away. She was the owner of the world famous Comedy Store, which was and still is one of the most famous and well-known comedy clubs in the world, actually. So she was responsible for, discovering Jim Carrey and Robin Williams and David Letterman, Jay Leno, Richard Pryor. I mean, the list goes on and on. About 2 years before 9/11, she had, what do they say in Arabic? Ru'ya?
Yeah, ru'ya.
She had a ru'ya, she had a vision. Yeah. She said there's going to be a war between America and the Middle East, and your people are going to be more misrepresented than ever. And that's why I hired you guys. So she hired us, and she called the show, originally we were called the Arabian Nights. But we changed it because Maz Jobrani is Iranian, and we were getting a lot of complaints from Iranians. Like, we're not Arabs, we're Persian. Yeah. We had our own empire. Yeah. Like, all right, whatever.
Right.
So we changed it to the Axis of Evil comedy tour, and it just took off.
As you always say, you just needed maybe a North Korean to complete complete the team. Okay, now I would like to go maybe a little bit into the politics side of the Arab. Today we see a lot of things happening all around the world, but nevertheless we don't see a lot of Arab American involvement. I mean, maybe historically there was a couple of candidates that tried to be presidents, and you've got as well in the Congress, but overall let's talk at least in the last 30 years, from what you recall. How do you paint the picture of Arab politicians, Arab American politicians, in the overall American politics?
Look, I try not to touch politics because I'm an entertainer, so my job is to entertain. But looking at it from an outside perspective, I think Arabs, haven't been very active in politics in the U.S. for several reasons. One is maybe, we feel like we don't have a place. Two, Arabs, as you know, are very emotional people. So, God forbid you get in a debate with somebody and you're just trying to have a friendly debate. And it turns into like yelling and screaming and cursing and all this stuff. And it's like, a politician should be cool and composed and, have and display leadership. And, one of the reasons why the Arab world is so divisive is because there might be leadership in each country, but there's no one unified vision, if that makes any sense. And which is, I get it. It's like, America has a unified, for the most part, has a unified vision, whether it's one-dimensional or racist or culturally, whatever it is. Right now, America is very dissected, so this is a bad example. But some countries,
Sorry,
I'm just going to say some regions, have a kind of unified vision. I think for the most part, and I think the Arab world is, perhaps just dismantled. There is not one traction that's pulling everybody into one direction. It's a lot of different spider webs happening, and I think people are just confused.
Yeah, well, maybe that actually means that, like a lot of people would say, that there's nothing called an Arab world today. You've got Arab countries, but you can't portray all Arabs as being one part.
Yeah, and I blame Winston Churchill for that. Had he not divided us up, we would have been one.
Yeah, well, it takes two to tango, as they say.
Right.
Yeah.
I got this email. Dear Mr. Ahmed Ahmed, the President of the United States, Barack Obama, cordially invites you to the White House for his annual iftar dinner. Please RSVP. I thought somebody was playing a joke. So I replied with, LOL, who's this? They replied back, this is a real invite. If you want to attend, we need to know ASAP. So I RSVP'd, I flew to DC, I showed up at the White House. There's about 150 very nicely dressed Muslims standing outside. I gotta be honest, they look a little shady. I thought a net was going to drop on us. We got 150 of them. Just another billion to go.
And I don't know if you had the chance to read or hear yesterday's comments by Joe Biden to the Muslim community. Had you had the chance to read or hear anything about it? Well, he talked about how he would integrate Arabs and Muslims, specifically Muslims, into his administration, and be more attached to their causes, demand a Palestinian state. And do you think this kind of rhetoric is why, and correct me if I'm wrong, the perception is that a lot of Arabs in America and Muslims, and statistics would back that, support more the Democratic Party? Do you see that as being the actual case?
I don't know, because I feel like the Arab community, because everybody's so focused on making money, they can give, they I don't think they care really. I think it's more of an economical vote on their end, but I don't know. I'm just speculating. Joe Biden, I think he's one of those guys who's just he'll say whatever he can to get the vote. And that's what most politicians do. I'll support the black community. I'll support the Muslim community. I'll support redheads. I'll support, whatever. Like whatever, they'll support whatever group just to get their vote. Are they is that gonna play out? Are you gonna see a Hijabi woman in office standing next to Biden as his Secretary of State or his advisor? Most likely not. And America doesn't want to see that either, unfortunately. You see how racist America is right now. Especially with going back to Donald Trump. Look, the only thing Donald Trump did good for this country, America, and the world is, damn, he's funny. He is funny, man. I read his tweet. I retweet some of his tweets sometimes because they're just so funny. And he's provided exponential amount of humor for the world. He's probably the most made fun of president ever.
Right.
Even more than George Bush Jr. and so forth. So, in that sense, there was also a thing when he got elected. A lot of people were pulling their hair out and going nuts over this. And then I remember seeing a couple of clips on YouTube and Facebook and just random feeds that were coming down my algorithm of things to watch. And I saw a couple of Muslim clerics, and they were talking about, Donald Trump was elected president, and we as Muslims believe that the Almighty, is always in power and is the highest and the all-knowing. And if God didn't want Donald Trump to be in office, he would have made it that way. So God put Donald Trump in office for a reason. Let's hold on tight. This is going to be a long roller coaster ride, and let's have a couple laughs, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what the psychology is behind it, but if that's the case, then Trump, we wouldn't be where we are today. I mean, I live in Los Angeles, California. I had people protesting right out in front of my window. Black Lives Matter, Black Lives. And most of these people, I don't even think knew what they were protesting for. They just wanted to be out on the streets. So
yeah, and why do you think that Hollywood took a very early negative position towards Trump? I mean, you're somebody that is part of Hollywood and it's inside. Why do you think they have this issue with Trump?
Well, Hollywood's very left. It's a very left liberal society. It's an artist community. They don't, even though it's about money, making money in business and show business, they're still very, very left. And so that Republican stance doesn't really flow. There are very few Republicans in Hollywood. And if they are, they're quiet about it.
Right. And on the other side, there is always this saying in the Arab world when it comes to the Democratic Party, is that it supports a lot the Islamic groups in the Arab world. Maybe you've heard this, and you can see even in Congress we've got a number of Muslim Democrats that advocate for issues related to being against certain governments that are against, like the Islamic Brotherhood and etc. And you being somebody from Egypt, and I'm sure that part of your growing up, you've heard this whole thing of Islamic Brotherhood and effect and impact on Egypt. Why do you think that, is it true, first of all, that the Democrats support Islamic politics?
That's kind of a loaded question. I'm not sure. I think Democrats want the Islamic vote, first and foremost, just to get Trump out of office. He's obviously not pro-Islam. He had a Muslim band that he placed. He's very racist. I mean, it's clear that he's a racist president. But are Democrats looking for the Islamic vote? I think they're just looking for the vote. Black, Hispanic, white, Catholic, Islamic, they're just looking for the vote.
We notice a lot, Ahmed, that the Arab Americans usually have a very negative approach towards their countries. I mean, we see a lot of either Egyptians or even from other nationalities, when they come to the States and they live, and even some of them who are born here, they would take, kind of I wouldn't say like anti-establishment in their home countries. Why do you think that's the case?
I mean, look at most of the countries in the Arab world. The politicians, the government, the military, it's just corrupt. And so you come to a place like America, and America's not, I wouldn't say it's the greatest country in the world, but it's a great country. We have freedom of speech here. That's worth billions. You can say whatever you want here, and you cannot go to jail for it, period. If you say one thing against the government, the royal family, the military, whoever in the Middle East, minimum 2 years in jail. So I think, Arabs who move here feel a bit of freedom. You can feel the... you get to exercise your First Amendment, your freedom of speech. You know, you can film a officer trying to arrest you. You're allowed to do that. You can't do that in the Middle East. You know, they'll break your phone, take you to jail. I think the Middle East is a very serious culture, or it's become a very serious culture. Again, going back to unity and cross-cultural awareness, as opposed to, and diversity, as opposed to you know, having a very secular and linear look on life. I mean, I know that there are pockets, you know, of you're in DC or Baltimore, right?
No, DC, yeah.
DC. So I don't know what the culture in the restaurant scene and the sort of social nightlife or daytime even in DC is like. But I know in California, you know, most of the Middle Eastern shops and restaurants and that, you don't see a lot of Americans in there. And it's not because Arabs are not welcoming. They are. But I think people look at it as a novelty. You know, like when you're sitting around with your wife, hey, honey, let's go get Chinese tonight. You know, let's go to the Chinese restaurant. Hey, let's go get Arab food tonight. Let's go to the Arab. It's like a novelty. It's not something you think of like. It's not like a In-N-Out burger or like Starbucks. It's not a normal thing. It's a niche. It's a niche thing. But you know, I feel like Arabs, you know, are not to blame for it, because I don't want to use the word blame, but I think Arabs are reluctant to be overly inclusive. And I don't know if it's because it's, you know, being misunderstood or not wanting to share the culture, maybe feeling intimidated. You have to remember, when you, like, I wasn't born here, I was born in Egypt. But I pretty much may have well, you know, been born here because that's all I know and remember was being born and being raised here. But I assimilated way more as an American than I did as an Arab. Like I have some Arab friends, but they're more like me, like westernized. But I don't go to Arab concerts. I love Arabic food, but I don't eat it every day. I don't, you know, it's nice to go to an event or a birthday or a wedding, you know, ceremony that's Arab oriented, but it just feels like it's a very exclusive kind of thing, and you know, God forbid you have anybody else, you know, as in the part of the circle. So it's a mixed bag. I mean, every culture does it. The Asians
You're
do
like,
it, the Latinos do it, blacks do it, whites do it.
you're
Whites created it.
you're proud of your heritage, but you're not fixated to live every moment of it.
Oh, I'm very proud. I talk about it in my comedy daily. Like people always ask me. I say I'm Egyptian American. I was raised Muslim. I actually performed Hajj when I was 27 years old. So I'm technically Haji Ahmed. Or in Egyptian we say Hag Ahmed.
Hag Ahmed, yeah.
But I've traveled to so many countries around the world. I almost don't even define myself as Egyptian, North African, Arab, Middle Eastern. I'm like a man of the world, and I think all people should think that way, or a woman of the world.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you a question that every Arab is asking today in general, and I think you as an American should be, you know, you should answer this question. Who do you think will win the next elections?
Oh, Donald Trump for sure.
Okay, why is that?
I mean, look what's going on in America right now. You know, look what's happening. You may hate him, you may disagree with him, you may think he's the devil, you may think he's the worst person on the planet, but he has most of America convinced that he is the guy. And all the noise that you hear, anti-Trump and screw Trump, and he should be, you know, taken out of office and impeached and this, that, and the other. All that stuff that you're hearing, it's all from the loud liberals. And I'm not liberal. I'm not Republican. I'm not Democrat. I'm just more independent. I have my own way of, thinking. So I don't claim a party. But I've traveled around America enough just to physically see that. I mean, look, if Joe Biden wins, then, I was wrong. But I think Trump will get reelected. I think people, most of America wants him in office. They want somebody who's, an asshole, basically.
Maybe politics needs somebody like Trump to make America great again. At least this is what he said.
Well, you look at the Arab world, right? Before the Arab Spring, right? Before the revolutions, right? You had all these powerful presidents / dictators in office, and they were tricking the 3 generations, right? 3 decades of presidency, the Hosni Mubaraks and so on. Like they were all in office, and there wasn't a fair vote. There wasn't let the people decide. It wasn't about that at all. Whatever they did, whatever they rigged, whatever they, but the people overthrew them. So I don't know. It's a weird time in our history. Trump will either, if Trump wins, which I think he will, you'll see more rioting. You'll see a little bit of a mini revolution happening in America, because people are just sick and tired of it. And just to be honest about it, the Democrats and the liberals and the real left, they're going to make a stink. They're going to make a stink about it. They're not going to let this happen, and they're going to do everything to get him out of office or start an uprising. When the when the riots happened just recently from the George Floyd, these Antifa groups were dropping off pallets of bricks and spray paint and gasoline on corners, and organizing people to go riot and loot. It was a very controlled and strategic thing they did. It wasn't just like a last minute thing.
This was in California.
This was all over the U.S., but in LA, in Los Angeles, for sure, it was being strategically designed to do that. It wasn't just like kids were like, "Hey, let's go down to the Target, and let's loot there." They were saying, "Hey, there's a Target down the street that's wide open. Go get it." So I don't know. I think politically we're in a very sensitive time. I think politically, I don't even think America knows what's going on right now. I've heard a lot of people say, if Trump gets reelected, I'm moving out of America. Well, they said that last time. And nobody left. I left. I moved to Asia for 2 years.
Okay. You moved because of Trump, or you just moved because of your personal decision?
A little bit of both. I had a job offer to work in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, for a comedy events company for a couple of years, and I got to see Asia. It was beautiful. It was when Donald Trump was in office, right when he just got elected. So it made sense for me to be out of there, because it wasn't helping my cause. Being an Egyptian Muslim with the name Ahmed Ahmed. there's nothing.
It's with you forever, Ahmed. It won't change.
Yeah, we got one. His name is Ahmed Ahmed. Oh yeah, he hairy. Yeah, hold on one second. Mr. Ahmed, what's your purpose for business in Washington, D.C.? He say he a comedian. Say something funny. Yeah, he said he just graduated from flight school. I love you, DC. Thank you so much.
Ahmed, I really thank you very much for joining me in this episode. We learned a lot about you personally, and we also were enlightened about your ideas on politics and an Arab community. So I hope we can do this again sometime soon.
I would love to. Thank you so much, Yasser. I'm grateful for your time, and best of luck to you.
Thank you.